Hello, my name is John Gobin Shaw. I am 70 years old. I was born and raised in Florida. I have traveled to 35 or 37 countries. I spent 15 years in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, and Asia. And I have pedaled a fully loaded touring bicycle about 38 to 40,000 miles through 19 countries. I had known in detail about the attacks of 9/11, September the 11th, 2001, since 1997, and that's what I'm talking about here. I'm going to tell you what led up to my finding out about those attacks, and I will tell you about all the people that I told about those attacks before they were going to happen, and you will also come to realize that the people you had in place to protect your security arbitrarily, without any reason, screened out that information over and over again and generally ignored it. I'm going to tell you this in the briefest possible way. I have written a manuscript about all this. Right now it's over 54,000 words. It could easily go to over 60,000 words. So just keep in mind I'm going from main point to main point, but I am also giving you tangible, real-world details, facts. Well, they were facts when they happened. They aren't anymore. They're in the past, but it's all real. I was in the United States Army in Germany in 1980. There were two people in the Army who gave me 6 months of explicit, detailed felony terrorist threats. Who were these people? They were Sergeant John P. Vogel of HHD 21st Replacement Battalion in Frankfurt, Germany. He was widely known as an insane, psychotic Vietnam vet. The other idiot was Specialist Stavronakis, who was also known as being absolutely crazy. To make a long story short, they told me for 6 months, and that's not an exaggeration, repeatedly over and over again, many times, that they had been in contact with terrorist cells in Europe. They told me that 2 terrorist events had been arranged and guaranteed. One would be covert, and the other would be an obvious act of terrorism. They also gave me the name of the organization which, according to them, had arranged and guaranteed one of these events. The name that they gave me, and when I say they gave me this name, they did not just mention this casually one time in passing. They gave me this name no fewer than 50 times. No exaggeration. Hell, maybe 100. I did not count. They just kept repeating over and over. Remember that name. What was the name? It was Iran. Stavronakis told me, he wrote down I-R-A-N one time. He said that's not how it is spelled, and it has nothing to do with the country of Iran. I didn't ask too many questions. I thought they were crazy. They said both events would involve horrific mutilation and death. One covert and the other an obvious act of terrorism. They said if I got caught up in the one that was covert, I would never be able to prove it was done deliberately. And if I got caught up in the one that was an obvious act of terrorism, I would never be able to prove anything. I wouldn't be able to prove the threats. Nobody would listen to me, so on and so forth. They would get away with it. I have no way of getting anything done about it. Well, they were right so far as the United States is concerned, but, this is a global community. Not everybody goes along with that kind of stuff. They told me I had to get out of the Army. They said there was no way I would get my military benefits if I stayed in. They said, if you leave, just walk out. You will not really get in any trouble. You will lose your benefits, but you are not going to get those anyway. There's no way you're going to get your military benefits. If I decided to stay, they said, that I would be murdered in one of these events. They said if I survived it, I would be horribly mutilated and significantly, profoundly disabled for life, etc., etc. if I went into all the details, it would take hours and hours. Okay, I mean they made these threats repeatedly. Repeatedly, they gave me detailed information over and over and over for 6 months. I thought they were crazy. I pretty much ignored it. I went on leave. That's what I was there to do. But before I went on leave, I told my roommate in the Army, his name was Jimmy Rowe, that I was going on a U-Rail trip that summer and that they were going to derail my train. He said I was paranoid. We talked about it for a while, and at the end of the conversation, I said, if it happens anywhere, it will happen in Ireland. And Jimmy Rowe said the same damn thing. I was going to Ireland and Rome. Those were my two main destinations. I left my travel orders with the military, Ireland and Rome mainly. So I went on leave. Went out on leave on my U-Rail trip. Well, guess what? Both of those events happened exactly as they had described. The first one was a train derailment in Ireland, August the 1st, 1980. It killed 18 people and injured 70. These people were horrifically mutilated, bodies cut in half, people dismembered, contused over every inch of their bodies, people horribly disfigured and profoundly disabled for life. I survived it. Well, how did I survive it? What, chance or luck? That's what people say. It had nothing to do with chance or luck. When I got on the train, I made a conscious, deliberate, purposeful point of positioning myself in that train to survive it just in case it really did happen. Now, again, there's a lot more to this. I cannot give you all the details. Well, they derailed, and there I was, surviving a train derailment in Ireland. Well, let me tell you how it happened, okay? First of all, when Stavronakis and Vogel gave me all those threats, they told me that there would be a derailment. They also told me that I would know what the truth was when I crossed those points. Now, they made these statements not just once, many, many times. It wasn't just once. They gave me the name Iran 50 times, 100 times. I don't know how many times. Okay, how did they derail the train? Well, they set up some manually operated points on the track, and they set the points to run the train off the track. Now, they do have a publication explaining how it came to be that those points were on the track and set that way. It's awfully thin soup. Most people would probably just take it for granted. It was plausible, but then they didn't hear the threats. If you are moral and honest, and if you had heard those threats, which you did not, but if you were moral and honest and you had heard all those threats and the details, there is no way you would accept without question their explanation for derailing the train and calling it an accident. I mean, the train was going at 70 miles an hour. It was like being put inside of a gigantic blender. I was slammed so hard backwards my body tore 2 sets of steel-bolted train seats right up out of the floor and smashed a steel-bolted table flat. You talk about hyperextended whiplash. Okay, I was buried in rubble. Well, I did manage to get out of it, and I did organize a small group of people to go back into the wreckage and treat people for shock and stop bleeding wherever they could find it. And there was plenty of it going on. I can tell you that right now. I got an Army Commendation Medal for that. What was the name of the train company that derailed the train? Cora Semper Iran. Very interesting, very interesting. Okay, the second event, the obvious act of terrorism, happened the following morning. That was a powerful bomb explosion in the main train station of Bologna, Italy, killing 86 people and injuring 200. People were blasted to pieces so badly that their bones were fragmented and blasted through the air like shrapnel and embedded in the bodies of other human beings, bodies blasted apart completely beyond recognition. So we have 104 people killed, 270 injured in one 24-hour period on my line of travel, and the company that derailed the train just happened to have the name Iran in it. Well, I cut my vacation short, and I returned to my permanent duty station, which at that time was on Rhein-Main Air Force Base, August the 8th, 1980. By that time, I knew there was definitely something rotten going on. I mean, terrorism, terrorist threats, mass murder. I think that's reason for concern. So I started making complaints and written reports, and it was generally ignored. Again, I could go into much more detail, but the point was that they intended to protect these sons of bitches from arrest and prosecution. I said, fuck that, to hell with the military. And I engaged in a series of activities, deliberately and purposely, that would kind of force the Army to discharge me, but I didn't do anything bad enough that they could actually put me in prison. I just pushed the envelope until they discharged me. I'm back in the United States. Okay, I start writing letters all over the goddamn place. I wrote to the two most widely distributed newspapers in 20 states, congressmen, senators, FBI, Secret Service, White House, governors. I mean, I got so desperate I wrote to the National Enquirer in Boca Raton, Florida. I mentioned that to the Saudis, too, later on. I noticed they got some anthrax sent to them about 9 or 10 days after 9/11. Anyway, I wrote all over the place. I wrote to foreign newspapers. I wrote to magazines. I even wrote to a newspaper in Kabul, Afghanistan. I mentioned the threats and the derailment, trying to get something done about it. Well, what I found out was I got very little in response in terms of, useful information or any kind of help. So the message I was getting was that, I don't matter, or my rights don't matter. I don't know. What were they sending me? What's the message I'm getting there? I mean, some people who heard some of the threats in Germany before the derailment and the bombing, they were told to keep their mouths shut, do not get involved, do not give any testimony anytime, any place, anywhere. If you do, your families will be hurt. You go back to the United States, you have children, your families, your children will be tracked down and harmed. I heard them say this. I was right there. This is like organized crime. It's like thugs, criminal thugs. All right, so I was out of the Army, and I realized that I was not going to get any justice from this goddamn country in the United States. I did write to the FBI. They wrote back to me, and I told them about the threats and what happened. They wrote back to me, listen to this. They wrote back to me and said, well, you're out of the Army now. If these people follow you or threaten you anymore, let us know right away. What kind of bullshit is that? Well, anyway, let's fast forward a little bit, and let's see if these people are really going to get away with all this. Okay, so it's 1983, and it is the middle of June. I am in an Islamic city of maybe 900,000 people in North Africa. And what am I doing there? Well, I am having a conversation with a fellow who told me his name was Khalid. What am I telling him? Well, I am telling him how he can use commandeered fuel-laden aircraft to attack tall buildings in the United States. Now, the conversation was a lot more detailed. Like I say, I can't say everything. I'm just giving you the main ideas. He had approached and spoken to me first, and when he spoke, it was in a very strident and virulent manner about how they hate Americans and how they're going to attack the United States. He said they were going to do it with a nuclear weapon. I strongly advised him against doing that because of the consequences, and I told him how to do it with airplanes. He liked the idea. He also identified another person there as Osama. Okay, well, was it Osama bin Laden? Well, I don't know. I can say for sure there was a resemblance, yes. Tall, thin guy, maybe 6'2", 6'3", tall, thin. He had a white headband around his head, a long white thobe, walking through the Medina in that town. Okay. Anyway, I saw Osama a little later, too, but I got the hell out of there, went back and continued my trip around Europe. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit more to August the 8th, 1985, exactly 5 years to the day after I survived my arranged and guaranteed accident in Iran. What do you know? That same duty station was the site of a lethal car bomb attack. Can you imagine that? I mean, we have all heard that saying, what comes around goes around. Yes. Well, how is that for a 5-year plan? I mean, they use terrorism. You don't hear about it at all. Not one word in the newspapers anywhere. Okay? It's used back against them, and it makes headlines around the world. How these innocent people were attacked by these vicious terrorists. Bullshit. They had it coming. Okay, so I'm back in the United States again, and I'm writing letters and talking to lawyers, and the lawyers are a bunch of pussies. If there's no money in it for them, they're not interested. They're not out for justice. They're out for cash. So now we have to fast forward much more to 1997, and I'm in South Korea at a place called Youngjin University. I'm teaching English as a foreign language. But that's not all I'm doing. I am also emailing with people in Saudi Arabia. And one of the things I sent them was a very brief, and I mean very brief, summary of a manuscript I had written, which also had to do with using a commandeered fuel-laden aircraft to attack a government complex. They liked the idea. They insisted they wanted to continue the conversation. This was an email writing. Again, there's a lot more detail. I can't go into all the detail. I would be here all night for hours doing that. They indicated that they were going to do it. I judged that it was serious. At one point in our written correspondence, I told them that if they actually followed through with the mission as they had indicated they would, that I could come back to the United States and tell people what was going to happen. They could still do it anyway, but I did caution them not to say anything to anybody in any way regarding the true nature of the mission. I also told them if they did not already have the personnel who were trained to take care of the technical aspects of the mission, like flying airplanes, they'd come here to South Florida and get the training here. They have flight schools here. I told them that. I told them quite a bit about South Florida. I told them about the train derailment. I told them about the bombing. I told them about the threats. And I also mentioned 3 places in particular. I only mentioned 3 different places that I had written all those letters to. One was the National Enquirer in Boca Raton, Florida. The other was that television program up there in New York, and also senators and congressmen. Those are the only 3 that got anthrax. Those 3 got anthrax after 9/11. I don't know why they try to blame Bruce Ivins in Frederick, Maryland about that. He lived outside Fort Detrick, where they have the biological warfare program. I don't think he had anything to do with that. And I just told you why. Okay, so I knew I could come back to the United States and tell people, and they wouldn't believe it, because I had already done that after that situation I was in Europe. I came to learn that the American people are, in fact, asleep at the wheel and incompetent when it comes to realities about the wider world. I mean, they all know their jobs and their own world that they circulate in, but when it comes to having knowledge about the world and its people and its events, they don't know anything. They arrogate to themselves that they do, but the fact is they don't, and I knew that, and I told the Saudis that. Bin Laden said it's arrogance. Okay, so my friend in Youngjin University at that time was Larry W. Bowman. Larry W. Bowman had been in law enforcement, I think, most all of his life. I know he was in the military police. He was a veteran of the war in Vietnam. He had been on the police department in Cincinnati, Ohio for 10 years. He was a private investigator, and he has the doctoral degree in forensic psychology. As I got the information through Saudi Arabia that they were actually going to do these attacks, I would go into Larry's office and tell him about it. Now, Larry was the only reasonable, even-minded person that I told this to over a period of 4 years. He's the only one who was reasonable. We talked about it at length. He called me back into his office sometime later, a few days later. He told me that they had traced some of these emails, and in essence, now the conversation went on for quite a while, but in essence, he told me that I had better be careful. He said those emails came from, quote, a suspicious part of the world, unquote. He told me those emails came from, quote, oh, Sammy, unquote. I had no idea who he was talking about then, but it's not surprising that he knew. I mean, I just told you his credentials. He knew a hell of a lot more than he let on. And I'll tell you something else. Teaching English was not all he was doing in South Korea, if you know what I mean. All right. So what I'm trying to tell you is that I had known in detail about the attacks of 9/11 since 1997. Now, I started telling people in Korea, and I continued on for a period of 4 years up to and through the night of September the 10th, 2001. And on the night of September the 10th, 2001, I made an anonymous phone call to some law enforcement number in Fort Pierce, Florida. I gave them some details about how the attacks would happen very soon. That conversation went on for quite a while, too. I'm not going to go into all the details. It would take forever. Okay? It was an anonymous phone call from a phone booth in front of Dunkin' Donuts or somewhere around Dunkin' Donuts on Okeechobee Road in Fort Pierce, Florida, between I-95 and the Florida Turnpike. I hung up the phone and took off before they could send somebody around to ID me. Okay, I told people when I got back to the United States, I told 50 or 60 people in Korea, 18 people in China. In China, I was told to wipe the pictures off the board and stop talking about it. It was nonsense. It would never happen, and if I kept talking about it, I would be fired from my job. I had drawn big pictures on the board, chalked in. I'm a professor. I was teaching English. I had drawn in these big pictures on the board of the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, with the airplanes flying in, trying to tell people how it was going to happen. I got the same bullshit answers from almost everybody I talked to. Anyway, I went back to the United States. Again, I can't tell you everything I told everybody, but let me give you some examples of what I was up against, okay? There was this deputy sheriff in my hometown of Stuart, Florida. I had seen him around for decades. I'm not going to give you his name, and there's a reason for that. And it's not because I'm scared or anything like that. I'm just not going to give you you don't deserve that information. Okay. I had seen him around for decades. I did not really even know his name. I did not know him personally, but I had seen him around for a long time. I figured I'm going to hand this information to this guy gratis, okay, on a silver platter. I did not ask for a reward or any special consideration, okay? I just gave it to him for nothing, all right? I laid the whole thing out to him on the table in detail about the Saudis, commandeer fuel laden aircraft, exactly how it was going to be done with commandeer fuel laden aircraft, the exact targets, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the United States Capitol building, and approximately when. And I told him that they knew about this area. They did. I gave them quite a bit of information about this area. When I wrote to the Saudis, okay, in 1997, I was asking them for help. I told them about the train derailment, the threats, the bombing, the killings, the mass murders, and I told them quite a few other things, too, that happened around Stuart, Florida. I was asking them for help. I was asking them if they knew anybody who could help me get retribution against these power-crazy sons of bitches. I asked them for help, okay? Well, anyway, I explained all this to the deputy, And I remember he really did not seem very interested. He kept looking at his wristwatch, and he got up and left after a while. And when he left, he asked me what I wanted him to do with that information. Well, look, I've never been in law enforcement. I mean, why is he asking me? I know what the law said he had to do with that information. The law said he had to report that information to the local field office of the FBI. I contacted the FBI after 9/11. He had not done it. They verified and assured me that they had not received any information of that nature. There's one example. How about I talked to a guy's last name Osborne. I think he had been a detective for like 20, 25 years. He was doing some work for the Florida Department of Corrections. I gave him all the information just like I had done to the deputy sheriff. I mean, I laid it out to him in detail. Well, he gave me a funny look. He put his finger up in the air, he twirled it around a little bit, and he says, sure, I suppose they're flying around here right now. Okay, you see what I mean? I ran across this thing everywhere I went, this kind of thing, okay? I called 911 in my hometown of Stuart, Florida, early in 2001. Okay, I told them terrorists or guerrillas were in the area planning attacks and using airplanes. I gave them the information, hung up, and walked away. It was a payphone. They're lucky they got that much information. I mean, I was born and raised in South Florida. This system here, they were sadistic, evil bastards, okay? I mean, they were torturing innocent children to bloody pulp. That's serious. When I say they were torturing innocent children to bloody pulp, that's exactly what they were doing, and they were protecting these goddamn low-life pedophiles in the community from arrest and prosecution. They were paying them bribes to keep from being arrested. The whole thing was fucked up, I'm telling you. I mean, that kind of government should be attacked. That was the way I saw it. But anyway, I told many more people. I got the same kind of responses. I heard things, oh, that's crazy. You couldn't possibly know that. I doubt very seriously anything like that is going to happen. How do you know that? No way, that's insane. No way, no way. You couldn't possibly know that. One person told me, even if it happens, you still don't know that. Okay, so you see what I was up against. Well, okay, the attacks finally did happen. The images of the World Trade Center crashing to earth, the planes flying in, the Pentagon in flames, took center stage, and just about every form of media all across the country and many places around the world. Well, what can I say? Well, Larry Bowman at that time of the attacks was a professor of criminology at the University of Great Falls, Montana. He got called back into active duty in the National Guard. They sent him to the war in Iraq. Well, I noticed all the images on television and YouTube, so I went to YouTube, and I thought, well, I think I should tell some people that I had known about these attacks. Now, you got to realize I've been telling people about this for 4 years in detail, okay? I went on YouTube and I just mentioned, well, I had known about these attacks in detail since 1997. Okay, well, typical of these narrow-minded, stupid, goddamn idiots. Okay, they answer me saying that I'm a liar, I'm delusional, oh, I'm psychotic, I'm lying just to attract attention to myself, I'm hallucinating, what the fuck? Oh, boy. You understand? Okay, I mean, you people are your own worst enemies. Okay? Well, after a while, I got extremely provoked. I am a person of integrity, and I pride myself on my integrity. I pride myself on having solid integration between what I say and what I talk about, my words and the reality of the world, okay? I pride myself on that, and I really got provoked. So I started throwing it up in people's faces and making inappropriate comments. That wasn't the best judgment on my part. I know now I should not have done that. It was too soon after 9/11. Emotions were running at an all-time high. People were freaking out all over the place. They were angry. They were thirsty for the blood of their enemies. Okay? I got a message on a YouTube video in the comment section. It said, do you know what kind of noise it made when those buildings came crashing to earth with all those large steel girders breaking and those planes flying into the buildings? And they said, we know who you are. And they said, well, I don't know, who was they? The message was there. It was written down. I don't know whether one person wrote it or 20 people are behind it or whatever. It was just a message on YouTube. And it said that you are going to hear loud, disturbing noises wherever you go for the rest of your life. And we already have more than 1,000 people who have volunteered to participate in this noise campaign against you. That's not an exact quote, but that was what they said. Okay? At one point, I told them, I said, the noise that that catastrophe caused, probably a larger version of a train being derailed in Ireland after 6 months of detailed terrorist threats, a train smashing apart, hundreds of thousands of pounds of steel smashing all over the place and coming to a dead halt in 3 seconds from 70 miles an hour, slaughtering a group of people, a large group of people. I imagine it makes a noise similar to that. Well, they didn't care about anything. They just threatened me. They told me that they're going to make sure I hear loud, disturbing noises wherever I go for the rest of my life. Now, the question is, okay, was there any integrity between that threat and anything that unfolded later in the real world? In other words, anybody can make a threat. That's just a kind of a mid-level abstraction, what they said. Were there any tangible realities that happened that proved that that threat was authentic? Okay, and the best way I can think of to answer that for you, not that you're asking it, as a matter of fact, I doubt anybody's going to listen to this to begin with. I mean, they weren't listening before the attacks. They weren't listening afterwards. Why should they be listening and caring 19 years later? But I will tell you what happened later after they made that threat, and you decide for yourself. Okay, I am a bicycle tourist. I have, in fact, pedaled a loaded touring bicycle something like 38 to 40,000 miles through 19 countries, and I have many newspaper articles verifying this. I bicycled through the United States, Canada, Mexico, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, and China. I camped out most of the time. I loved doing that. I don't do it so much anymore because of my advancing age. And I really don't feel as well as I used to because I got poisoned by those goddamn motherfucking sons of whores. That's why. And I'll tell you about that later, too, if you want to listen. And I don't blame you if you don't. Let me tell you what happened. I was on a bicycling tour from southeast coastal Florida to San Diego, California. That might sound kind of far out to some people, but for me, that's my idea of having fun. Okay. I will tell you how these no-good goddamn underhanded sons of whores did this, okay? How they managed to create all this noise for me. Now, this first phenomenon that I'm going to tell you about may have happened 20 or 30 times before I even began to actually notice it, but I noticed that every time I came to a bridge, cars and or trucks would show up and cross the first expansion crack of the bridge at precisely the same instant that I did. I mean, when the imaginary line of that expansion crack was bisecting me, it was bisecting these vehicles. Now, this happened on roads where you might not see any traffic 20, 30 minutes at a time, okay? It might be a Sunday afternoon in a back road. No traffic, 20, 30 minutes at a time, not one car, but every single bridge. Now, when I say every single bridge that happened like that, that's not an exaggeration. It happened at every bridge, every goddamn bridge, all the way across the continent of North America. Excuse me. Okay? Now, When they hit that expansion crack, it caused the loudest, most disturbing, ear-splitting, mind-numbing, penetrating noise you ever heard. Okay? I mean, this was extremely unusual. I had bicycled through China. I had bicycled through some of the most densely populated areas of the world. I had never heard anything even remotely like this anywhere. And it didn't happen just once. It happened hundreds of times. I didn't count. However many bridges I crossed from Florida to California, that's how many times it happened. That's not coincidence. It was timed, coordinated, and planned by a bunch of no-good, cowardly sons of whores. Now, here's another tactic these no-good bastards used. When you're bicycling along on a narrow two-lane road, it's really nice to have some pavement to the right of the white line. It's a margin of safety, okay? And that's what I was using on these two-lane roads. I was lucky enough to have that margin of safety. It might be 3 or 4 feet to the right of the white line. It keeps you out of the main motorized portion of the road. That's great. I like that. There was one problem. Occasionally, intermittently, there was an obstruction laid across the path. Okay? It was always, every time, in a place where you could not just ride the bike around to the right. There might have been a drop-off there or something. Whatever, I couldn't ride around to the right. I could get off and wheel a bike by hand around to the right, but I don't like doing that. I don't like this get off, get on, get off, get on stuff. I like keep going. Now, sometimes, to give you an example of an obstruction, it might be a 2x4. Another one might be a piece of plywood with a bunch of nails sticking in. Another one might be the muffler of a car. Another might be the branch of a tree. There's no tree around, okay? Whatever. So the only thing for me to do was to swerve out to the left into the main motorized portion of the road, go around the obstruction, and get back into the side lane. Well, now there was a problem with that, and I'll tell you what it was. Every one of these obstacles that I came to, other vehicles would show up, and at precisely the exact instant that I came to these obstacles, each one. It could be 2 cars, or a car and a truck, or 2 trucks. Okay? But the point is, they were there. And again, this would be on back roads. You might not see any traffic at all for 15 minutes at a time, 30 minutes at a time. But every obstacle, and I mean every obstacle all the way across the continent. Okay. The possibility that that was just chance or mere happenstance or coincidence and nothing more is absolute zero. So what happens if you swerve out into the road and you have these 2 vehicles coming along? You get the point? Occasionally, though, there was only 1 vehicle, but every time, and I mean every time without exception, every time it was only 1 vehicle, it came from behind in my lane, okay? That's called crowding. That's called intimidation, okay? Now, in certain parts of the western United States, it is permissible, legal, to ride a bicycle on the interstate. On the interstate, there is a hell of a lot more traffic than there was on these side roads that I had been on. And when I got out on the interstate, I kept looking to see how many times 2 vehicles came abreast of each other and me at the same time. I mean, I'm looking at the eastbound traffic and the westbound traffic. Never happened even once. I mean, with 100, maybe even 1,000 times more traffic, it never happened once. That 3 abreast never happened once. But it happened at every bridge all the way across the continent, on back roads where there was hardly any traffic at all, and every obstacle. Every obstacle. Every one. There was no exception. I got into one of the western states somewhere, and I'll just say it was probably somewhere in Texas. Hell, it might have been New Mexico or Arizona. I don't think it was Arizona. I'm pretty sure it was Texas. I had a slow leak in the back tire of the bicycle. Okay, I got off, into a little convenience store just off the interstate. I leaned the bike up against the wall. I figured I was going to, patch the leak. Well, this goddamn tractor trailer comes pulling into this fairly sizable parking lot. He parks at the edge of the parking lot, out by the road. Now, I'm telling you, this thing was emanating an extremely loud, high-pitched, penetrating noise. I mean, it totally filled the parking lot. I had never heard anything even remotely like this in my life. I mean, many years ago, I drove tractor trailer cross country, okay? I had a bus route in Frankfurt, Germany. I have been around commercial vehicles for a long time. I had been to truck stops all over the country. I had never heard anything even remotely like that. I had never heard anything even 1/20th like that emanating from a tractor trailer anywhere on this planet. It was astonishing. It was jaw-dropping. I was standing at the edge of the sidewalk looking over at that truck, examining, inspecting it from a distance, saying to myself, what in the goddamn hell is making this noise? I did not see anything that was obvious. I didn't see anything unusual like a loudspeaker or a public address system, whatever the hell. Anyway, this guy gets out of the cab of the truck. I had never seen him before, as far as I know. He looked maybe in his mid-50s or early 60s, something like that. To me, he was a total stranger, okay? He walked all the way across the parking lot, directly up to me, and said, "We lost friends on 9/11. Okay, again, there's more to that. Okay, you're getting the... I'm just trying to give you the main ideas here, what was going on. Okay, so I bicycled farther, and I finally got into California, and I was on Highway 78 near the city of Glamis in California. Anybody who knows 78 in that area knows that it is a narrow two-lane road. In some portions, they have a narrow side lane. So I'm going west on 78, and along come these two tractor trailers. One's going east, and the other is going west. These were unusual-looking tractor trailers because they were kind of new-looking, and they were shorter than most of those trucks that you see out there going over the road, and they were narrower, and they had very darkly tinted windows. As a matter of fact, I would say those windows were pretty much just black. And they had these metal sun visors on the outside going over the tops of the windshields. They just looked queer, just different from other tractor trailers. Okay, so along come these two tractor trailers. One's going the east, one's going west, and I find myself three abreast with them on a narrow two-lane road with no side lane. Highly unusual. So I carry on farther. Well, apparently these trucks went up, turned around, and came back, and I find myself three abreast with these two trucks. I went on farther, and again, the same thing, three abreast with these two trucks. Maybe that happened 7 or 8 times. And that was obviously timed, obviously coordinated, obviously deliberate. That's crowding. It causes stress. Okay, so you get the idea. Also, in between 2011 and 2013, I taught English at the King Saud University Preparatory Year in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Riyadh is the capital city of Saudi Arabia. I lived in a place called the Stars and Clouds Hotel on Khalid bin Walid Street in Riyadh. Now, a mile or a mile and a half away from there was a place called the Granada Mall, and I would walk up to the Granada Mall on weekends. And to get to the Granada Mall, I would walk along a place they called the Promenade. Now, the Promenade was about as wide as the length of a football field, and on both sides of its length, on the outside, both sides of its length, were sidewalks, I think, Each sidewalk was about maybe 20 feet wide. And then between the two, there were two roads running on both sides of the promenade, one side and the other side of its length. Well, running between those two large roads were smaller roads that went across the promenade, 90-degree angles from the main roads. Well, I would walk up there on the weekends, walking along the promenade, right? Easy going. Well, something kept happening to the extent that I began to notice it. And what that was that every time I came to this little intersection where this crossroad went across the promenade, some vehicle would intercept me there when I was in the middle of the road and keep barreling right on through. And if I did not run forward or fall back, I was going to be roadkill. That was obvious as hell. That happened 7 or 8 times. I don't know how many times before I began noticing it. And once I finally realized that something was going on, the next weekend when I walked up the promenade to the Granada Mall, I watched for it. Okay, this time I'm watching for it. And sure enough, when I got to that same little intersection, this small, faded blue Toyota pickup truck came flying around the corner of a walled-in area or something like that. They came up to the intersection, went barreling right on through, and if I did not run forward or fall back, I was going to be killed. All right, the next weekend, I'm walking up the promenade, I'm watching for it. Here comes the same small, faded blue Toyota pickup truck, same guy, and the same deal at the intersection. I have to run forward or fall back, or I'm dead. How many times did that happen exactly like that? I didn't count, but maybe, 15 times. More to that also, but I'm not going to go getting into that. I mean, I also taught English at the Ministry of Defense in Kuwait. I survived a nasty car wreck there. And I also taught English at the Yemen College of Middle Eastern Studies. I was at the British Embassy the morning militants tried to assassinate the British Deputy Ambassador, and also snipers showed up not too far from our school and murdered 50 peaceful demonstrators and wounded, they say, approximately 300. Other things happened. More detail. I'm just giving you basic facts. Okay. So, back in the United States, it was very difficult getting anything done. Whenever I told people about the coming attacks, I got the same negative responses. When it came to the stalking, though, I did contact the FBI. They're useless. They work for the government. They don't work for the people. They don't work for me. I know that. I contacted the FBI. I will give you a quote from the office of the FBI in Miami, Florida. Quote, "The FBI is not going to help you, Mr. Shaw," unquote. Yeah, well, they're not going to help me. Well, the question is, who the goddamn hell do they want to help? I mean, they are under lawsuit. FBI, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, under lawsuit. Why are they under lawsuit? Because they ignored many perfectly valid warnings and tips about Nicholas Cruz, who murdered 17 students at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School in Parkland, Florida. I live fairly close to Parkland, okay? I mean, all the facts came out in the newspapers. People found out what happened. They had known that this kid was bragging about how he's going to murder his classmates. They had contacted the police and sheriff's department, FBI, like 45 times. Okay? 45 times? There's no excuse for that shit. Okay? I mean, 45 times? There's no excuse. The police knew about it. The sheriff's department knew about it. The school resource officers were well aware of the fact that he had continued saying he was going to do that. The students were scared shitless. The teachers knew about it. His own mother moved out of the house. She was scared to death of him. Did they do anything to put him in a position where he could not launch those attacks? No, they did not. He went in there with I think it was an AR-15. It murdered 17 students and shot how many more? Okay? The point being that just because people do not respond to a valid complaint, it doesn't make them right. In that case, that was just negligence, indifference, incompetence, and malfeasance in the discharge of official position. Okay, so I was at the release of the American hostages from Iran, where I met Jimmy Carter and Secretary of State Muskie. I was on an anti-stalking forum with Gavin Eugene Long. I think it's possible that I might have met Omar Mateen when he was in Saudi Arabia. I know he was in Saudi Arabia the same time I was. I know one of my friends approached me, and he said that he had met somebody who was there for one of those pilgrimages. You know, they go to a pilgrimage there in Mecca and different places. Every Muslim is supposed to do that if he can, at least once in his lifetime. And he said that the guy was from Florida, and he said that he had mentioned the city that he was from, and one of the towns that he had mentioned sounded like one of the towns that I had told him sometime before in conversation. So I named some cities. Well, like Stewart, Jensen Beach, Salerno, Indian Town, Port St. Lucie. When I said Port St. Lucie, he said, "That's it, St. Lucie, that's it." Well, a short time after that, two people showed up in one of my English classes. They were not my students. They were older, and I had never seen them before. And of all things, you're not going to believe this, but they raised a topic which I had never heard raised in all the time in all my classes across Asia. They raised the topic of homosexuality. And I'm going to tell you, you're not going to believe this. I would take a polygraph on this any day of the week. Somebody said that they should be shot. Well, that was exactly what Omar Mateen did. He lived in Port St. Lucie, Florida. He also went to Martin County High School. He lived within a few miles of me for a long time. Then he moved to Port St. Lucie, maybe 9 miles away. He went to the Pulse nightclub, which is, I guess, some kind of a homosexual hangout in Orlando, Florida. He murdered, I think he had an automatic weapon or something. He murdered like 59 or 60 people, wounded a bunch of people. I also met Timothy McVeigh. It was in, believe it or not, a donut shop in Stewart, Florida. I think it was 1994. And I'm going to tell you the truth. I was in there talking about using a commandeered fuel-laden aircraft to attack government. You know what he told me? You're not going to believe this. I don't care whether you believe it or not, as long as I know I'm telling the truth. He told me they were building a fertilizer bomb. He had somebody with him. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I had no idea fertilizer could be made to explode. I thought he was bullshitting me. The conversation turned it to the subject of the militias, which they were all in the news in those days, constantly in the news. They were down in the Everglades going through these maneuvers. And I thought the militia, they're just a bunch of bullshit. They're running their mouth. They're a bunch of potbellies who go out and plink at tin cans and targets on the weekends. They're not going to do anything. They're just mouth. And I said that to McVeigh. And you know what he told me? He said, well, we are not militia and we are not talking. We are definitely going to do this. We are going to attack government. Now, I did not know what to think about it. I mean, I just thought, well, here's another young guy. He's letting off some steam. He's pissed off at the government. His mother lived in Fort Pierce. That explains why he was in that area. His sister lived in Pembroke Pines, Florida, to the south. His mother lived about 15 miles away from that donut shop. That's why he was in the area. I did not know who he was or anything about anything. And I didn't really know who he was after the attack on Oklahoma City until 2002. I just never connected him with that attack because the attack was in Oklahoma. But then I read a book about the Oklahoma City bombing, and I found that his mother lived in Fort Pierce, 15 miles from Stewart, and that he had been in the area at that time. I looked at pictures of him. That was him. That was Timothy McVeigh. I met Mehmet Ali Aga in Frankfurt, Germany. Now, we could go on about this sort of thing, but I'm not going to. You get the idea? I don't know why I keep meeting these people and getting involved in these situations. Anyway, one thing about Florida is law enforcement there is terrible. It always has been. Nobody seems to want to be able to do anything definitive and permanent about it. It's terrible. It's a shame. But, I want to ask you a question, okay? Look at the people who have been leading our civilization for so many years, from the top, the intellectuals, the brainy people. If they are so goddamned intelligent, why is it that these lions and leaders of progress and industry have put us on the road to global warming, rising sea levels, an uncertain future, and the possible partial extinction or total extinction of the human race? Science is telling us this. This is a real thing. If they're so goddamn smart, why have there been so many horrific, terrible, injurious consequences to all this wonderful progress that they have wrought for mankind? The fact is, their designs were not really so intelligent after all. What they were a headstrong, indifferent lunge for whatever worked in the short term, whatever brought profits in the short term, totally regardless and indifferent to any harm that it might cause and consequences to future generations. They could not care less, okay? Your government doesn't give a shit about you. They lie their asses off, and you elevate them to the highest offices in the land. They're smirking in your faces. The bankers are stealing billions of dollars, committing big-time felonies. They're not prosecuted. Your politicians subsidize them with money from your tax dollars. Okay? Come on. And then you turn around and vote for them, right? Okay, if there were an asylum for the sane in America, it would be empty, okay? Okay, my name is John Gobin Shaw, and everything I have told you here is true. It's factual. There's much more to it. Like I say, I've written a manuscript. It can be easily over 60,000 words, 54,000 completed already. If I were to go into all the detail, it would take forever. I'm not a recent immigrant to this country. Some of my ancestors settled this country in 1680 in Pennsylvania. They fought the Indians on the frontiers. They fought the British in the Revolution. They fought in the War of 1812, the Civil War, every war, the Civil War, every war. Okay? My grandfather was James Edward Shaw, Dr. James Edward Shaw, the most prominent minister in the Northeastern Conference. He was famous in his day, very well known. His uncle was General John Peter Shindell Gobin of Pennsylvania. Gobin was a lawyer. He joined the Civil War in April of 1861, and he stayed throughout the entire war, participating in some very bloody battles. As a matter of fact, his unit was called the Bloody 47th. He was provost judge of Charleston, South Carolina during Reconstruction. He became a successful attorney, state senator, president pro tempore of the State Senate of Pennsylvania, lieutenant governor, major general commanding the Pennsylvania National Guard, and United States Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Army of the Republic. You remember the GAR. They passed legislation for regular tax-paid veterans benefits. They legislated to make Memorial Day a national holiday. Well, my great-great-uncle was United States Commander-in-Chief of the GAR. And I had quite a few other ancestors who were very well known in their day. They were famous. They were leaders in government. They were leaders in the military. They were leaders in the clergy. well-known people, very well-known people. Okay? They were known, some of them in history, for being extraordinarily intelligent and in some ways far above the ordinary in intelligence, executive ability, wisdom, and energy. Okay? Now, it came my time to help my country. I found out about those attacks. I told people about those attacks in detail everywhere I went. I was derided, attacked, cursed, besmirched, degraded, okay? And people made threats against my children. And in one case, it wasn't just a threat. You got the message there? The people who lied to you before 9/11 and who lied to you afterwards were elevated to the highest offices in the land, which means you people don't deserve to be protected and you don't deserve the truth. They're still laughing in your faces and you're voting for them. Okay? And that's the kind of government you want. That's the kind of government you get. Okay? You got the government you deserved, and guess what? The government you deserved got you in more ways than one. And they're still getting you, and you're still voting for them. That's because you all are insane. Well, I tried to help, but, it's like they say, you can't fly like an eagle when you're surrounded by a bunch of turkeys. I, too, have a certain talents that are, in fact, far above the ordinary, and they are so far above the ordinary that when I demonstrate over and over and over again, people just can't believe it. They just block it out. It's not possible, they say, that anybody can do this. Well, I've done it many times. Telling about 9/11, I told many people many things that were going to happen. It was ignored every time. The only person I was able to save was myself, and I told you how I did that in that train derailment in Ireland. That was all true. Everything I've told you here is true. I am a graduate of Barry University in Miami, Florida. I am a graduate of Indian River State College in Florida. I graduated with honors. I have written manuscripts of several 100,000 words. Well, several hundred, wait a minute. Well, 300,000 or 400,000 anyway. And I've done a lot of world travel. I have read hundreds of books. I am not an ignorant person, although I don't really know all that much, but I'll tell you what I do know. I know what the hell I'm talking about, and I think that's a hell of a lot more than most of you people can say. Okay, so I've told you about the fact that I had known about the attacks of 9/11 since 1997. I told you how I got the information, and I told you what I did about it afterwards, and I told you that I met resistance at every step, except for Larry Bowman and the person that I called anonymously on the night of September the 10th, 2001. Those were the only two reasonable people who reacted and responded appropriately the way everybody should have reacted and responded appropriately. Now, here was the problem, okay? Preventing those attacks from happening required the active cooperation of the authorities and the corporate media. I couldn't even get any cooperation out of a single person, much less the authorities and the corporate media. And don't try to tell me hindsight is 2020. I already told you I'd known about it for 4 years. I was at least trying to get something done. To prevent those attacks from happening required a large nationwide campaign publicity that people from Saudi Arabia were in the area. They were planning to commandeer fuel-laden aircraft and fly them into the Pentagon, the World Trade Center, and the United States Capitol building, and that it's very possible that they are in Florida training, okay? If they had mounted a campaign like that, I guarantee you, without any question whatsoever, they would have called off those attacks. They would not have done it. Now, it doesn't mean they wouldn't have done something worse later on, but they would have called off those attacks. Now, it was impossible to get that kind of cooperation. I mean, sure, you have this big corporate media, and they're capable of spreading information out all over the place, but They just want to do that for their own purposes, and they're not going to do something like that just based on my word. And I didn't have any evidence. I had no evidence whatsoever that I had even talked to these people. I had no evidence that I had even communicated with people in Saudi Arabia, much less that they were going to do what I said they were going to do. I understand that, but that's the way things are, okay? I will say something else. I could have called the Pentagon 100 times and warned them and tipped them off what was going down, but I did not. And I did not because of the way I got screwed over in the military in Germany, okay? I mean, if they countenance or condone those kinds of actions against me, and those poor people in that train who were slaughtered, and those people in the train station the next morning who were blasted to pieces, if they're going to countenance or condone that in any way, I'm goddamn sure not going to turn around and protect their interests, okay? You understand? I called it an air attack, and they did it. You think that's delusional? Think what you want. It happened. I have a right to fight back. I'm a human being. I have human rights. The worst abusers of human rights throughout the history of the world have been governments, military forces, and police forces. They have no right to do that. People were told over and over again. I could have called the Pentagon 100 times. I did not call them even once. Not once. And I told you why. I'm not a bad person. I never have been. I'm not a felon. I haven't been convicted of a crime. I joined the Army because I was poor. I was penniless. I was homeless. I found myself waking up homeless every morning in the country my ancestors had founded. I joined the Army because I needed a job and an income, because I knew I could advance my education and see the world. That was it. I had no interest in killing anybody. I did not want to get in any kind of a war. I wanted to live in Europe. That's why I joined. I had never done anything to anybody. And they started a terrorist campaign against me. Okay? I wrote letters all over the place. There were no answers. What does that mean? It means basically it's kind of condoned or countenanced in some way. All right? So the thing is, if you countenance that or ignore it when it happens to somebody else, how do you feel when it happens to you? It's not so cool, is it? All right? It happened to me, not a word, nothing in the newspapers. Nobody did anything to help me. It happens to you all, you have to start a war. Then you have your president telling you about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That's bullshit. The weapons inspectors had been there for years. They compiled their reports in a book. It was published by Scott Ritter. I read the book. They've been over there for years. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and they knew it. And that book came with a warning that the Bush administration would use weapons of mass destruction in Iraq as a ploy to invade Iraq. He already knew that. They had been planning to invade Iraq for years. And there's proof of that. There are books on the subject. I'm a reader. I've read hundreds of books. I'm not ignorant. Okay, I've told you what I've had to say. It was a terrible thing that happened. What McVeigh did was a terrible thing. I mean, he did not know there was a daycare center in that building, that federal building for children. He did not know that. He would not have done that if he had known that. I guarantee you that. Okay? What he did was terrible. It was horrible. It was a tragedy. It is not defendable. But I will say one thing. He did not just stand by and do nothing at all and allow those bastards to get completely away with murdering those people in Waco, Texas. Okay? I mean, remember the speech by Patrick Henry at the Virginia Convention? And he was asking, why do people stand idle? What do gentlemen wish? Should they lay supinely on their backs, hugging the delusion phantom of hope until they are bound hand and foot? Okay, at least he did something. It was terrible what he did, but, somebody had to do something, and somebody has to do something. And if you're going to let this government carry on the way it is, then you can expect periodic reprisals. You have to understand They have sent your military around the world. They have slaughtered hundreds of thousands of innocent, unarmed, non-combatant civilians around the world, men, women, children, babies, the unborn, blasted to pieces, burned alive, and tortured to death. They are going to retaliate against you again, and I'm going to tell you what they want to do, okay? Now, you listen to me, okay? First of all, I'm going to tell you something. If I were you all in New York City, I would spread out a little bit, if you know what I mean, okay? They're going to try to nuke New York City. I think you already know that, okay? Well, that's not just hot air. You understand? I don't know who's going to do it, when they're going to do it, and I don't know anybody involved in it, but that's what they're planning on doing. You can take my word for it. Oh, no, don't take it. Do me a favor. Don't take my word for it. As stupid as you people have proven to be, just stay there, okay, and wait for it to happen. That's more to the point. Anyway, I've told you what I've had to say. Every word of it is the truth. Anybody who questions this in any really serious way, I'm perfectly happy to take a polygraph exam on everything and anything I have said in this recording, but I'm not going to pay for it. I mean, if you really think I'm a goddamn liar or some delusional or something like that, you pay for it, and you'll find out what the truth is, okay? Anyway, my name is John Gobin Shaw, and I have been an extremely energetic person, and at many times during my life, I have exhibited in a very real way an intelligence that is, in fact, far above the ordinary. It's just that I can't get anybody to listen to me. So if anybody listens to this all the way through, thank you so very much. You're a very considerate person. At least you have the brains and the consideration to listen to what somebody has to say. Over and out.